that it's always good to remind ourselves before we do 7 of what it says in verse 1 of 8. So let me just read that. I'm going to set this up deliberately because the chapter break is sometimes unfortunate and people have argued, in my opinion, rather uselessly about what's being said in 7. But in 8:1, let's get this in mind in anticipation of where we're going. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Messiah Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death. For what the law, the Torah, could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, that's human frailty, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as an offering for sin. God condemned sin in the flesh, Jesus did through his cross and so on, so that, and this is the 4th and final verse, I'll read this part ahead of where we are, the requirement of the Torah might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. It's important, I think, to keep that section of Scripture in mind. Otherwise we might get terribly depressed as we read 7, and people have argued endlessly about what 7 is. I do think that 8:1 to 4 is very important. This should be the standard operating procedure for Christians. Now we have our lapses, we have our failures, we all know about temptation and so on. But that's not the predominant point of view of Paul. But 8:1 through 4 is. But verse 6 is a marvelous sort of summary of the whole thing. But now we have been released from the Torah, that old system, having died to that by which we were bound, so that we are now serving in the newness of the Spirit, not in the oldness of the letter. That's the key to the whole thing. Is the Torah done away with? I'm so tired of that question. Of course the Torah is not done away with. Paul said we confirm the Torah. On the other hand, we are doing away with something, and the answer is we're doing away with the Torah in the letter. If it's sufficient only not to commit adultery outright, if that's enough, then the Torah stands. But Jesus himself said you've got to go beyond that. That hating is as bad as killing. He spoke of cleansing all foods. Jesus himself did. So we're now in the spirit of the law. It doesn't mean the Torah is done away with. It does mean that the letter of the Torah is not binding on us. Therefore, we're not insisting on resting on Saturday or the holy days or the new moons. All of that's passé. But the spirit of the law is absolutely what we're living by, and that's more specifically the Torah of Messiah, as distinct from the Torah of Moses. That's the distinction which people seem to find difficult to get over. So I love that 7:6. Isn't that a great verse? It sums it up so well. Not the oldness of the letter of the law, but the newness of the Spirit. And that thing about Spirit reminds me always of John 6:63, a key verse. John 6:63 says, Jesus said this, the words that I'm speaking to you are spirit and life. They're life-imparting spirit. So the whole idea in this very clear. In fact, when Dan and I did this sort of commentary on Romans recently, it really hit me between the eyes how vivid this is. The idea of being dismissed by death of one's spouse, dismissed from that obligation, is very powerful, isn't it? Paul is trying his best to get over the idea, which is radical in the extreme, that something is inadequate about the letter of the Torah. That's a shocking thing for Jews, and to this day they find Paul absolutely impossible. I mean, people say Paul is a false prophet. They don't mind Jesus, but when they get to Paul, they say Paul's a false prophet because of what he's writing. It's a radical, radical change that we've got to move from the Torah of Moses to the Torah of Messiah.